And these are very common examples that creation scientists kind of throw out there. And there are other samples that I'm sure traditional scientists throw out that would counter these. But I want to just kind of talk to you about what some of the results are, because as an engineer, our science is actually based on something we can use. And so if you test a live snail, and that live snail dates to be 27,000 years old, I'd say there's probably a problem. So that's actually the case. These are actually cases out of scientific journals, by the way. They're not just things I've put on my slideshow. A freshly killed seal dates to be 1,300 years old. That's close. I mean, it could be. I mean, within a tolerance. Now, mammoths, which even secular scientists believe died relatively recently. In other words, in whatever the most recent ice age was, because a lot of mammoth carcasses still have their fur, their flesh, they're just frozen. So they got frozen in the tundra, and they dig them up. Well, this mammoth dated to be 29,500 years old on one side, and 44,000 years old on the other side. So again, different parts of the mammoth date differently, which by itself would kind of indicate that the dating theory is flawed. And you can look at this and say, well, yeah, but that's 29,500, 44,000, so you just take the average. Well, scientifically, if the theory isn't working, why would you take any of those dates? And then the living penguins, 8,000 years old. They're a little bit older than the dead seal, but... so what about dinosaurs? So first of all, what I just said about carbon dating, it can only go back 50,000 years. Does anybody know when dinosaurs went extinct based on traditional science? 65 million years ago. So 65 million years ago is when we believe the last dinosaur breathed and got hit by the meteor or whatever it was. So basically, a dinosaur bone was dated, and I kind of question, well, why would you even date it in the first place, Mr. Scientist? Because it's kind of an exercise in futility, but it dated to be 30,000 years old. There's another dinosaur, 4 dinosaur samples in the same find dated to be 20,000 years old. And these are dinosaur bones. These are petrified bones that are actually getting carbon dates of thousands of years old. So what about human bones? So has anybody seen the special on Artie? Or Searching for Artie or Finding Artie? Gosh, no Discovery Channel nuts. Well, so human bones, and if they get older and older and older, and we'll talk about human finds, I think it's in week 5 or week 4. But here's a human skull that was thought to be part of the missing link, dated to be, thought to be 250,000 years by evolutionists. When they actually did a carbon date on it, they got carbon dates of 27,000 years old on one of the bone samples and 53,000 years old on another bone sample. So these are the kinds of numbers that you probably won't hear. You will just get, you know, the human ass. In fact, you would not hear this on the Discovery Channel. They would say 250,000 years old, and they would not report the carbon dating dates. Because what I'm going to talk to you about as we go through this dating section today and tomorrow is that really scientists don't believe that carbon and isotope datings are reliable. In fact, they believe the theory of evolution is a better dating mechanism than actually using the radioactive dating. But if you opened up a biology book today or a geology book, one of the first opening sentences would be, scientists have established that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old because the rocks tell us so. And when they say that, they're not talking about carbon dating, but they are talking about the radiometric dating. So what kind of conclusions, I guess, can we draw from this? And I think the theory is good. I mean, if you just told me, okay, here's the theory. Carbon has a half-life of 5,000 700 years or whatever it is, and there's this much carbon left, I'd buy that. That seems like a good theory. But the reality is that the dates that they've come up with don't meet what I would say is good scientific rigor. In other words, even though they're tens of thousands of years old, they don't match. It's no different than if I said, hey, it's 30 degrees in this room, and it's 85 degrees in the other room, and everybody's generally comfortable. That's kind of ignoring the facts. It's like saying, hey, look, the numbers don't match it, but on average, it's probably all we got. So really, the biggest issue for me is just the poor results on the actual specimens themselves. In other words, if you're dating live things, and really, with any science, you want calibration. What calibration means is you have to test it. You have to make sure that the thing that you're dating really has a certain age. And so if you dig something out of the ground, you honestly don't know how old it is. And so if you carbon date it, that's just, it's kind of bad science. And so when you guys hear just kind of matter-of-fact dates, I think you need to probably question those and at least understand where the dating science is coming from and the fact that the science is not as established as maybe you've been led to believe. So with that, so where are we on time? We have plenty of time.
Yeah.
This guy's rushing through. Oh, go right ahead, John.
Sorry I'm late, guys. My name is Jonathan Shaw. I will be his apprentice, I guess.
Assistant.
Assistant. I'll be his assistant. I'm here to present a different view. I'm an old Earth creationist, and I will take some of the data that he shows you, and I see things differently, but I still see them pointing towards a creator. And you'll see later in some of the lectures that he gives that we agree on quite a few things. That even though we differ on maybe dating some things, we both see the beauty and the flawedness in evolution. We see the beauty in creation and how there's no way, we believe, there's no way that this earth, the people here, could be products of prebiotic soup.
Right.
And so you can ask us both questions. We'll both answer it a little differently. But it's both going to come back to the point that there is a God, and that we both believe that this is way too complex for there to be no God, for there not to be a God. So, yeah.
Okay.
You guys have any questions on stuff for this morning?
This evening.
I work nights.
Your workday starts now.
I just wake up.
What is your background?
My background, my father's a pastor. I grew up in the church. I grew up believing young earth creationism. I've heard all this stuff growing up. I actually recently, the Lee Strobel book he was talking about slowly started changing me. I read that. And then I'm getting my master's in Christian leadership right now at Hope International University. It's a Christian university in LA. And they partnered with an institute called Reasons to Believe. This is the institute that I'm doing my scientific studies through. And the basis for Reasons to Believe is the Big Bang has a lot of proof, and so we're going to stick with that. We're going to go from there, take a lot of scientific data that we have, and see if we can look at it and see what we can get from it. And what we see is the Earth is expanding, and because the Earth is expanding,
the universe.
The universe is expanding, and because the universe is expanding, it has to go back. If it goes back, then there has to be a beginning point. And this is huge for creationists, one way or the other. Because if I believe it, I believe God could have created the Earth to look old. I believe he could have created the universe to look old if he wanted to. But I also believe that he could have done it the natural way if he wanted to. And if you look at the Big Bang, it's not a bang, it's not an explosion. It's very ordered. It was just perfectly for if it expanded any faster, just a little bit faster. Like, you guys have no idea how tiny the expansion rates have to be. Just a little bit faster, and the particles would not have massed together to create the galaxies. If it expanded any slower, just a little bit slower, it'd be so dense that all we would have is black holes. So there are over 200 things that they have determined have to be so finely tuned for there to be simple life on Earth. Simple life. There are over 1,000 things that have to be extremely fine-tuned for there to be advanced life on Earth, that it is impossible to believe that there is evolution. 1,000 things that have to be fine-tuned is like saying the chances of this are 1 trillion, 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 trillion. One in that many. It's the same as if I told him to reach out in the entire universe and pick out one atom. Those are the chances of all these things coming together to create this universe, to create us. And so the beauty that I see in this universe, slow or fast, is just astounding. And so that's why we're here to teach you.
Okay.
I have a question. So I'm a young world.
Okay.
So I mean that's my, but something, and I don't remember the exact word that you used. You said that you believe God could have created the world to look old, or God could have created the world to be to imitate being new or newer, or God could have taken time to create the world if He wanted. But God took 6 days.
Right. The
Period. I mean,
The Hebrew word for day, though, is very ambiguous, because back when Hebrew was first written, when this was written, the word day could mean an era. It really could. They did not have a specific word for day.
On that thought,
The evening
do
and
you
the morning.
believe,
The evening and
that, that the Bible is the divinely inspired
I
word
do.
of God?
I believe that the
Then
Bible
do you
is
believe that it could be translated incorrectly?
not translated incorrectly.
Then it has to be literal.
When you're looking back, you can't look at our translation. You have to look back in the original
It's
Hebrew.
divinely inspired.
But is it divinely translated?
Of course.
Are you sure?
It has to be. If it's the word of God, and this is how we know God, it has to be.
We know that
verbatim.
the authors. I don't want to get in an argument here. I really don't. We know that the authors were divinely inspired by the Holy Spirit, but do we know that the translators were?
but He said not one word will ever be taken away or added to. I mean, and He said that one pin stroke will never be taken away from it. And if you either have to believe that with faith, or not believe the Bible.
Well,
Yeah, and I think when you, and I don't want to step on you, John, but if you look at it, and I've read a lot of stuff. Hugh Ross is probably one of the bigger leaders in the old Earth creation movement, and Lee Strobel, he's kind of he just doesn't get into the age perspectives a lot of times. So I don't know old Earth or young Earth. I think he's kind of agnostic on that. But the Big Bang is a big part of what he talks about. There's interpretations that, and I guess my problem with it, and again, I want to make sure we don't really get in the debate, is just kind of the plainness of the speech. You look at the Hebrew definitions, and there's an argument I think that can be made, and again, I just don't want to argue the argument,
we're
but
not here to
yeah,
confuse, or we're not here to cause arguments. We're
yeah, yes.
Mr. Schuster, on a different subject
Uh-huh.
what actual evidence is there that the magnetic field was stronger? Because I never know what
Okay.
to believe. I want to hear secular stuff. I know in the Bible, people
Uh-huh.
used to live a lot longer,
Right.
which shows something was going
Right.
on. But just from a scientific standpoint, what evidence
Mm-hmm.
is there?
The evidence that a lot of scientists point to is actually volcanic lava flows. And so what happens in lava, it's pretty much liquid rock, and the iron in that rock aligns to where they believe the magnetic field is. And it aligns stronger, more magnetic, more iron aligns than less, the stronger the magnetic field was. There's also scientific evidence or belief that when you look at the lava flows at the continental boundaries, where a lot of the tectonic plates meet, they believe that the magnetic field may have even reversed. So that when they look at the lava flow, again, these are kind of inaccurate clocks, but they look at flipping it, it flips back and forth. Now what you don't know is, well, which way was the lava actually going, when you had the reading. And so, but that's how they've determined that it was stronger. Now, the people living longer, there's a few different theories about that. The magnetic field is one. And the Bible, God actually, prior to the flood, God says, well, I'm kind of tired of these human beings, and I'm going to limit their days to 120 years. And so biblically, people just felt like God said, look, you're going to live. Now, right after that, Noah lives to be 600 and something, and his descendants lived pretty long. But after that, you can see kind of the normal age dropping biblically. But Adam was over 900 years old. So the other theory on just the magnetic field, though, was oxygen. There is a canopy theory, and I'm not going to probably get into the canopy theory too much in this class, but the theory was that there was a layer of water over the atmosphere, and that layer of water would have caused higher pressures, which would have actually created higher concentrations of oxygen. And so they believed that that was actually something that created a lot of larger everything. So large people, large plant life, and just more lush atmosphere, and actually more consistent. In other words, there wasn't really the ice cap poles, and it was just all kind of tropical throughout the whole world. Now, scientifically, that's a mystery. There is no, it's a theory, but it's difficult, because when they find fossils today, they find tropical things where they shouldn't find them. And I guess then you get into continental shift theories and a lot of other things, and it gets pretty complicated, but yeah, those are the theories.
Do you think the idea of the Pangea, where everything was one landmass separating, do you think that's biblically supported?
I think it can be, and I think it can't be. I mean, I think that Christians actually look at both views. Some Christians believe that in the flood, the continents drifted apart, but that at one time they were all together. There were other ideas, and a lot of anthropologists don't completely buy, as far as the continent splitting with human beings on them, and then developing whatever those native races of people were. And the reason they don't believe that is they can actually trace back DNA and some other things, and the naturalist scientists or kind of secular scientists they believe, I don't know if you've ever watched this series on the Discovery Channel, it was Finding Eve. They traced Eve back to Africa. And then there's some Christian scientists who have thought, well, it could have easily been traced back to Iraq or Iran. So.
I heard a theory one time about does water affect carbon dating? Like if something's underwater, does that throw off the carbon dating?
I don't know the exact answer to that. I can check it out. It does actually affect radiometric dating that we're going to talk about with rocks, because, and there have been some studies actually done, rate research, where they've actually tried to figure out, and we'll talk about this a little bit tomorrow, erosion effects and water being able to carry off some of the decay material that they believe, and daughter elements and different things. Because now if you're talking about billions of years, a lot of stuff can happen. And in those billions of years, especially if oceans are changing and continents are moving, all kinds of stuff can affect the dating mechanisms when you get into rocks. The carbon dating, for me, the proof is in just kind of some of the results that they've gotten out of carbon. Something's affecting it. And what's hard is you can't calibrate it on some of the older dates, because nobody was really there. And so you kind of do the test, you come up with a number, and you may come up with a series of numbers, and if they all kind of tend to agree, and they coincide with the date that they think the artifact ought to be, that date then gets published. And you'll hear it that, okay, we dated this to be such and such. If that gives them the wrong number, well, that must be contaminated. So it's really a difficult science. I mean, when we talk about this whole thing over the 7 weeks, that's why I think when it all is said and done, it's really, science doesn't have the foundation that it seems like it does with a lot of these things, I believe. So. Yes.
I have a question about the carbon dating. In here it said that the half-life of carbon-14 is like almost 6,000 years. How do you determine a half-life of that long a time when we haven't been studying it that long? And if you believe the Earth is only 6,000 to 10,000 years old.
Right.
Then
So what you do is in a lab, you actually figure out how much of the carbon-14 had decayed to carbon-12, and you then extrapolate to that half-life date. And when we talk about uranium, now we're talking billions of years. And there are decay rates that they've actually documented on uranium. And then there's the science of how much energy it takes. And we'll talk about, when we talk about some of the halos that are formed in granite, that actually contradicts some of the times. But you can't really go back 5,000 years and say, unless you had a known specimen that died 5,000 years ago, but then that just takes you that long ago. It certainly doesn't take you 50,000 years back. So. See, nobody's sleeping. That's good.
And then it would also not account for how much the atmosphere would have changed with the carbon-14 in the atmosphere at that point anyway.
Right. Right, and I think that there are a lot of events that people believe, not just dropping nuclear bombs and different things that have actually impacted. And if you look at the canopy theory, there's even a belief that the sun's rays couldn't have hit it, all the years that Adam had been around, because the Earth had been covered with this canopy. But I'm just going to Charlie again.
You've talked about evolution some, and I know you're probably talking about macroevolution, but what about microevolution?
Yeah. John and I kind of talked about this. I don't actually call it microevolution because, but we will talk about that when we talk about kind of the misrepresentations in the biology books. And this is probably one page that John and I are probably on the same page. Microevolution to me is genetic adaptation, and that's the term that I'm going to use for it, because I feel like the word microevolution, you're kind of saying, well, evolution's okay on a small scale, but it's just not okay on a big scale, and that confuses people. So they think, well, wait a second. I mean, so if you believe in microevolution, then certainly over billions of years, macroevolution could have happened. And I think that we're going to talk about the science of genetics a little bit, and why that's not really that probable. In fact, and I'll kind of share with you just a few highlights that most people in the U.S. don't believe in evolution. So it's actually it's ironic that our kids are still taught that, even though the majority of adults don't even believe it. So.
And it's taught all over the world.
Yeah.
As fact.
As fact.
And you're stupid
if you don't believe it. Yeah. And that's one of the things, and that's why I kind of want to get away from that as John and I kind of talk, is it's kind of name calling and poking fun, because I've read tons of this stuff on both sides. And you just, the name calling and stuff like that, I mean, honestly, I can understand why someone would believe a lot of different things. Now, me personally, I mean, I've really kind of tried to do my homework and research and things, and I really do believe. And like I said, John and I are kind of switching places to some extent. I mean, I actually thought, I kind of gravitated along that continuum until I kind of am where I am now. And honestly, though, I'm honest with myself enough to know that it's a thought, it's a belief that I have. It's not. I think you gotta understand the limits of science. And as a person who uses science on a day-to-day basis, I know the limits. I know what you can know and what you can't know. So, Jeff, do you have any? No.
It just seems that there's a lot of science where it's just a bunch of scientists kind of agreeing on certain theories, but it's hard to even prove.
Right.
A lot of it seems to be speculative in nature, and even if they agree on something, then something else comes to debunk it.
Yeah.
Then they kind of move to another bandwagon, so to what's supposed to be. Yeah. The truth.
And I think scientists would argue just what John said, is that's kind of the idea that it can always be disproven, and new theories can emerge, and that there's kind of this intellectual debate over science. I would argue that there's kind of more of a philosophy that's undergirding. So I'm a Christian. I have a Christian faith, and really, honestly, when I did my search, I had a bias. I mean, I was really looking to say, okay, the 6 days of creation, how's that really square with science? And honestly, there's a bias there. But I think there's a flip bias on the other side. There's this It's a faith. There is a faith out there that is just as strong as Christianity, and it's atheism. And there is something there that says, well, you know, we don't want this. You know, this has got to be the way things are. We're going to be naturalists. And there are some scientists that believe, in fact, one of the evolution books that I read was really based more on the idea that, okay, we just can't allow a God in schools. That it just comes down to that. And you know what? I don't care what intelligent design people think. I don't care about any of this other stuff. It's got to be natural. You know, there's got to be a naturalistic explanation. And I mean,